I have to here with 493W, our Coaching Principles and Ethics course. Want to do a case study where we talk about individuality within a team sport or team environment. And it's kind of a leadership dilemma. What we'll do is we'll do a case study, real life case study here, and we'll go through that. Then we'll also look at some history into similar situations that have happened, what we can learn from that. And then we'll look at ways to apply this and actually with a workshop. So you start to develop your philosophy on dealing with this dilemma. Let's take a look. All right, so the case study we're talking about, most of you are familiar with, started in 2016, was Colin Kaepernick, who was a quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers NFL team. On August 26th in 2016 there, he sits for the national anthem as a way to protest against police brutality. Hopefully you watched his live interview that's on Canvas, but it's also a link here then. It goes for a minute and a half so you see it in his own words. And then you will start to look at some different reactions around the media and all around the league. All right, some of the reactions, we'll start first with an actual NFL player, Minnesota Vikings lineman Alex Boone, who was a former teammate of Kaepernick's and the 49ers for several years. Quote says, "You'll see all these pictures of these veterans that have no legs and they're standing up in the wheelchair." Boone said Sunday, "I had a brother that served and he also lost friends and I know how much it means to him. It's shameful." Again, commenting on how the protest sitting or kneeling during the national anthem is a knock against the military and against America. Jamie Schultz, professor right here at Penn State, who's a pretty famous sport historian, did some interviews, quote, said, "People conflate these types of protests with being anti-military. This has nothing to do with the military. This has to do with race relations and what people of color endure. He didn't denounce our troops. The reaction is why no other player has come out, said they plan to do something similar." So again, Dr. Schultz talks about how it's about race relations is the point and not about the military. If we do some research into past case studies, you can see this type of protest, similar type of protest, started in 1968 with Muhammad Ali, who, if you're not aware, arguably one of the greatest boxers in our time. He also, though, again, was involved in a lot of civil rights that was going on at that time. All right, history lesson number one then. You need to do your research and know your history as a leader, and it'll help you when you have to make these tough ethical decisions like we have here on individuality within a team sport. So a little background, Muhammad Ali ironically died in 2016 when Kaepernick was starting this protest. If we go back in April of '67, when the Vietnam War was going on, Ali refused to be inducted into the U.S. Army. You can see then he was stripped of his heavyweight title. Ali also, as a Muslim, he cited religious reasons for his decision to forego, but it was really a protest against civil rights and against what was going on in our country at that time with the Vietnam War. He was also convicted of draft evasion, sentenced to 5 years in prison, fined $10,000, but more importantly, banned from boxing for 3 years in the prime of his career. Now, what happened then in '71 is the Supreme Court eventually overturned his conviction for evading the draft. The big note here is, again, he missed 3 years in his prime, but he's still the only fighter to be heavyweight champ 3 times in his career. Again, ironically, you see Ali on the left, and this is a picture of Kaepernick after a score, eerily similar, 1968 and 2016. Also in '68, we had Tommy Smith, John Carlos, and you also see in the bottom left, Peter Norman, who's from Australia, did a protest at the playing of the national anthem at the medal ceremony in the '68 Olympics, which was in Mexico City. So history lesson number 2. do your research and learn from this history. If we go back and look at this, Tommy Smith and John Carlos were both a gold and a bronze medalist in the 200 meter. When they did the playing of the national anthem at the medal ceremony, they raised a black glove fist and they bowed their heads in a salute to black unity. Again, they were both sent home, stripped of their medals right away. And note there at the bottom, Peter Norman, who got the silver medal from Australia, he wore an armband to support what was at that time a lot of the athletes were members of as the Olympic Project for Human Rights, OPHR. Again, he was stripped of his medal and sent home right away also. Keynote here is today they support Tommy Smith and John Carlos have done interviews supporting Kaepernick's protest, but they're also, like Ali, considered civil rights heroes. And you can see Norman, after he passed away, 2006, then in 2012, Australia apologized and considered his actions a moment of heroism. Here you can see then Tommy Smith, John Carlos now have statues, and it's in the Smithsonian, in the National Museum of African American History, which was done in 2016. So again, we're seeing history of similar protests from the past with very aggressive, emotional decisions initially, but as time went on, both Ali, Tommy Smith, and John Carlos have become national heroes. We look at some of our presidents or leaders' responses. Again, we can see very different reactions to this. President Obama in 2016, quote, he's following his constitutional right to make a statement. I think there's a long history of sports figures doing so. Keynote here is sales of the Kaepernick jersey jumped dramatically once his protest happened. So the NFL was making a ton of money off of his protest, but as we'll see later, was being very aggressive against him for doing the protest. Another leader's response, and this is President Trump, quote, maybe you should find a country that works better for him. A couple notes here. President Trump proposed to pardon Ali in 2018. Again, not knowing the history though, Ali's attorney, Ron Twill, said, quote, we appreciate sentiment, but the pardon is unnecessary. The U.S. Supreme Court overturned the conviction of Ali in a unanimous decision in 1971. There's no conviction for which a pardon is needed. Some society responses. We have the NAACP. Again, there was a rally for support in 2017, so now it's a year later. Some key points there. Kaepernick is continued $1 million pledge to donate to organizations that empower change. And again, there's a great video that goes over some of that. Some research articles here, if we keep digging into this, is we've got some reaction to President Trump at the time in the NFL, and we've got from several different media markets how this was handled and what reactions were. The NFL owners' response in 2018 then was that they required the players in the league to stand on the sidelines, but gave them the option to be in the locker room if they didn't want to stand. So again, this was the way they were trying to move forward in dealing with this very controversial protest. Interestingly, the players' union didn't agree with the policy by the owners and putting grievances for that. And so what we had is there was no resolution really right before the season, and players continued to protest during preseason games. Kaepernick then in 2018 now has been out of football. No team would sign him after his protest in 2016. then was picked up by Nike, where he does a Just Do It 30th anniversary ad, which is great. Hopefully you look at that, and talks about where he is 2 years later from the protest. Interestingly enough, then, while this is all going on, Black Lives Matter protests are going on, and it really comes to a head here in 2020 with the George Floyd death. You can see kind of a timeline starting in 2014, which led up to or started the protest with by Kaepernick in 2016, and then the continued dates all the way up to 2021 with, once again, the George Floyd death and then conviction of the officer, really bringing things to a head. So then what happens is the NFL commissioner's response starts to change in 2020 from both a ethical situation, leadership situation, but also from a marketing situation. So Roger Goodell, who is the NFL commissioner, initially was very strong against any protest being done, along with the NFL owners, which he represents. Said, quote, "We were wrong for not listening to NFL players earlier and encourage all to speak out and peacefully protest. We, the NFL, believe Black Lives Matter by the NFL." So our position is completely changed 4 years later by the commissioner and the owners of the NFL. Another interesting piece for the 21 season is the NFL anthem policy has changed. And what that is that now they say there's an option for players and personnel to wait in the locker room. And additionally, the new anthem policy is going to play also the Black national anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. All right, now that we've reviewed the Kaepernick case study and some similar case studies from history, more importantly now we want to start for you to apply this information, what you've learned, to your leadership philosophy and how you would react as a leader or a head coach. So some reflection and response questions. Is this social awareness or are these political statements? Second, is it a selfish act that takes away from the team, the protest? And third, what side of history do you want to be on as a leader of this organization? So a couple questions. How would you react if you're a head coach? Number one, what would be your individual, the player protesting, kind of the response you would have with them, with the conversation? Then what would be your conversation you would have with the team? Note here, interestingly, if you're not familiar, but a lot of you are Steelers fans, Antonio Brown actually videoed and posted on Facebook a locker room players only type talk. So don't assume these conversations are going to be kept in the locker room. And then third, what would be, you walk out of that locker room after you've had that team talk, and what would be your response to the media or the public? All right, some questions as you start to apply this to your coaching portfolio. Things for you to think about and build in your philosophy. What is your definition of leadership? How do you do it? You've got to give concrete illustrations of how you would lead. And again, these case studies and how you would react and how you would deal with it are great ways to provide concrete illustrations. What are some different leadership styles that can impact your decision? We showed some from history, and think about what fits your style. Number four, what are some major objectives for you as a leader of your sports program? Number five, how do you accomplish those objectives as a leader of your sports program? And six, what is sport ethics and how will you implement those values into your team? Remember here, the point we're trying to make is do your research before you react emotionally, and do all of your history, the good, the bad. As a head coach, you must take a position. Remember, the decisions you make impacts everyone in the organization, not just you. That's what makes it hard. Some examples, again, you can look at here is some resources is go to on Canvas, and the link is here too also, is my website, and it'll give you an example of an e-portfolio, which is really what you're doing for your final project. There's also assignment resources where you can go to menus on the website of Coach 101, and then there's a ton of coaching websites and links too. You're welcome to use it all, or not, but what I'm trying to do is give you some additional resources to make your research work a little easier and a little more efficient. Thanks.